You can't imagine what it was like. You've seen countless flying machines lift up into the sky. You felt the ground recede below you, the pitch and the sway of turbulence. You've seen cotton clouds billowing beneath you, but you never saw what I saw. December 17th, 1903. I was there. I saw it happen. You have to understand, we knew it was impossible. Every school child knew it. Man wasn't meant to fly. It couldn't be done. For thousands of years, we looked up at the sky. We studied the birds, gazed at the stars. But in all that time, not one human being had broken the spell. Not one lucky dreamer had lifted himself from the clutch of gravity. Not one solitary soul had cut the cord that binds us to this loving Mother Earth. Truth is, man was meant to walk. Then a couple of Yankees came down from Ohio. We all thought they were a little light in the head, if you know what I mean, wearing those funny hats and those stiff collars. They introduced themselves, and as I was shaking their hands, I remember thinking, Wilbur and Orville. What kind of peculiar names are those? But they kept coming back here over and over and over again for 4 years. And as time wore on, they won my respect. They were tenacious. They had decided that they were going to fly, and they stuck with that idea like pecan pie sticks to your ribs. Wilbur and Orville, they did it. After what I saw them do, I figured it wouldn't be long before everybody was naming their sons Wilbur and Orville. But I should let them tell you about it in their own words.
From the time we were little, my brother Orville and I lived together, played together, worked together, and even fought together.
Our first interest began when we were children. Father brought home a small toy actuated by a rubber spring, which would lift itself into the air.
We usually owned all of our toys in common, talked over our thoughts and aspirations so that nearly everything we did in our lives was a result of conversations, discussions, and suggestions between us.
We built a number of copies of this toy, which flew successfully, but when we undertook to build the toy on a much larger scale, it failed to work so well. The reason for this was not understood by us at the time, so we finally abandoned the experiments.
We were lucky enough to grow up in an environment where there was always much encouragement to children to pursue intellectual interests and to investigate whatever aroused curiosity.
In 1896, we read of the experiments of Otto Lilienthal, who was making some gliding flights from the top of a small hill in Germany. His death a few months later increased our interest in the subject, and we began looking for books pertaining to flight.
Dear Sir, for some years I have been afflicted with the belief that flight is possible to man. My disease has increased in severity, and I fear that it will cost me an increased amount of money, if not my life.
You can't imagine what it was like for us. We knew it was possible, impossible. We knew it couldn't be done. It couldn't be done.
I make no secret of my plans, for I believe no financial profit will accrue to the inventor of the first flying machine. You see, the problem is too great for one man, alone and unaided, to solve in secret.
The problem is too great for one man alone. But two men solved it on a remote strip of sand dunes we called Kill Devil Hills.
Dear Father, I am intending to start in a few days for a trip to the coast of North Carolina in the vicinity of Roanoke Island for the purpose of making some experiments with a flying machine. It is my belief that flight is possible to man, and while I'm taking up the investigation for pleasure rather than profit, I think there is a slight possibility of achieving fame and fortune from it. I am certain I can reach a point much in advance of any previous workers in this field.
They arrived for the first time in September of 1900. Two bicycle mechanics on a 36-hour boat ride from Elizabeth City. I was working at the local lifesaving station. That's me, John T. Daniels on the right. You can see what a handsome young fellow I was. We were just coming ashore from one of our practice sessions when these two strangers turned up at the boathouse. They said they were looking for wind to help lift their machines. I told them, yeah, we got wind. They said they were looking for sand to provide a cushion for their falls. I said, yeah, we got sand, wind, and sand. I didn't tell them, that's pretty much all we got.
Dear Catherine, we came down here for wind and sand, and we've got them. We are living nearly the whole time on reduced rations. No one down here has any regular milk. The poor cows have such a hard time scraping up a living that they don't have any time for making it. You never saw such poor, pitiable-looking creatures as the horses, hogs, and cows are down here. We have appointed the Kitty Hawk storekeeper our agent to buy us anything he can get hold of, in any quantities he can get, in the line of fish, eggs, wild geese, or ducks. Unfortunately, the economics of this place were so nicely balanced before our arrival that everybody here could live and yet nothing be wasted. Our presence brought disaster to the whole arrangement. We, having more money than the natives, have been able to buy up the whole egg product of the town and about all the canned goods. I fear some of them will have to suffer as a result.
No, we didn't have much in the way of money or supplies. What we had plenty of here was hospitality, Southern style, that, and nature in all of her wondrous glory.
This is a great country for fishing and hunting. The fish are so thick, you see dozens of them whenever you look down into the water. At any time we look out the tent door, we can see an eagle flapping its way overhead. Buzzards by the dozen soaring over the hills and bay, hen hawks making a raid on nearby chicken yards, or a fish hawk hovering over the bay. Looking off the other way to the sea, we find the seagulls skimming the waves, the little sea chickens hopping about as on one foot on the beach, picking up the small animals washed in by the surf. A mockingbird lives in a tree that overhangs our tent and sings to us the whole day long. It is very tame and perches on the highest bough of the tree and calls us up every morning. I think he grows up especially early after every big storm to see whether we are still here. We often think of him in the night, when the wind is shaking the top and sides of the tent till they sound like thunder, and wonder how he is faring, and whether his nest can stand the storm. The sunsets here are the prettiest I've ever seen. The skies light up in all colors in the background, with deep blue clouds of various shapes fringed with gold before. The moon rises in much the same style, and lights up this pile of sand almost like day. I read my watch at all hours on moonless nights, without the aid of any other light than that of the stars shining on the canvas.
After treating those Yankees to a good dose of nature's glory, we naturally couldn't wait to introduce them to nature's darker side.
Dear Catherine, a swarm of mosquitoes came in a mighty cloud Thursday afternoon, almost darkening the sun. This was the beginning of the most miserable existence your brothers have ever passed through. The agonies of typhoid fever are nothing in comparison, but there was no escape. The sand and grass and trees and hills and everything was fairly covered with them. They chewed us clear through our underwear and socks. Lumps began swelling up all over my body like hen's eggs. We attempted to escape by going to bed, which we did a little after 6. We put our cots out under the awnings and wrapped up in our blankets with only our noses protruding from the folds, thus exposing the least possible surface to attack. Alas, here nature's complicity in the conspiracy against us became evident. The wind, which until now had been blowing over 20 miles an hour, dropped off entirely. Our blankets then became unbearable. The perspiration would roll off us in torrents. We would partly uncover, and the mosquitoes would swoop down upon us in vast multitudes. We'd make a few desperate and vain slaps, and again retire behind our blankets. Misery! Misery! The half can never be told. We passed the next 10 hours in a state of hopeless desperation. The next night, we constructed mosquito frames and nets over our cots, thinking in our childish air we could fix the bloody beasts. We put our cots out on the sand 20 or 30 feet from the tent and house and crawled in under the netting and bedclothes and lay there on our backs, smiling at the way in which we had got the best of them. The tops of the canopies were covered with mosquitoes till there was hardly standing room for another one. The buzzing was like the buzzing of a mighty buzzsaw. But what was our astonishment when, in a few minutes, we heard a terrific slap and a cry from Mr. Huffaker, announcing that the enemy had gained the outer works and he was engaged in a hand-to-hand conflict with them. All our forces were put to complete rout. In our desperate attacks on the advancing foe, our fortifications were almost entirely torn down, and in desperation, we fled from them, rushing all about the sand for several hundred feet around, trying to find some place of safety. But it was of no use. We again took refuge in our blankets with the same results as in the previous night. This was surely the fate of the first settlers on the colony on Roanoke. They must have been devoured by mosquitoes.
Fortunately, mosquitoes are fickle creatures. Once they've had their way with you, they lose interest and they move on to ravage some other unlucky folk.
Afternoon spent on kite test. Found lift of machine much less than tables would indicate, reaching only about a third as much. Found that machine at 100 pounds would not glide at 3 degrees or 4 degrees on wind of less than about 23 to 25 miles per hour. Tried flying machine as kite at edge of slope of 1 and 1.5 and induced it to fly in front of rope with a strong upward pull. We tried the same experiment with a man on with similar results. Center pressure evidently traveling backward with a decrease in angle.
The days were filled with tiny discoveries that brought them ever closer to their goal. But with each advance came discouraging setbacks.
From the height of 30 feet, the machine sailed diagonally backward till it struck the ground. My unlucky brother had time for one hasty glance behind him, and the next instant found himself at the center of a mass of fluttering wreckage. How he escaped injury, I do not know. After 2 years of experiments, I was ready to give up. I told Org it would be 1,000 years before man ever learned to fly.
But they didn't give up. They kept coming back. You see, they realized something that nobody else had ever imagined. They realized that before they could build a flying machine, they had to become flyers themselves.
If you are looking for perfect safety, you will do well to sit on a fence and watch the birds. But if you really wish to learn, you must mount a machine and become acquainted with its tricks by actual trial. 1,000 glides is equivalent to about 4 hours of steady practice, far too little to give anyone a complete mastery of the art of flying.
They had to learn the ways of the wind, the forces that would lift the wings up, the ones that would push them down. They came back over and over again for 4 years with new charts and tables of weights and measures, new wing shapes, new launching methods. I can't tell you how many times I helped them drag one of their contraptions up to the top of Big Kill Devil Hill, only to see the wing catch it, spin it, and dash it away into the sand. But every time one of those things got smashed to bits, they'd immediately set themselves to figuring out how to build another one. Whew, those Wright brothers loved machinery. They talked about their gliders like schoolboys mooning over their first sweethearts.
The pattern is a double-deck machine having two surfaces.
Two surfaces.
Each 32 feet by 5 feet, spreading tip to tip.
Spreading tip to tip.
Spreading an area of 305 square feet altogether.
The front rudder spreads 15 square.
15 square
And the
feet.
vertical tail about 12 square feet, which was subsequently reduced to 6 square feet.
The weight
Weight
is 116 pounds.
The curvature
The curvature
is about 1 in 25.
The indications were that it would glide
It would glide
on an angle of
on an
about,
angle of about 7
degrees to
degrees
7.5
to 7.5.
degrees to 7.5.
The drift
Drift
is only about 1/8 of the weight.
the pattern,
The weight,
the indication
the vertical
Subsequently
double-deck machine
would glide on an angle.
glide on an angle.
The surface is the curvature, the curvature, the curvature, the curvature, the
curvature.
Easy, boys. Bit by bit, they increased the duration and control of their glider flights. Until in 1903, they were ready to take the final step, adding an engine. There was only one problem. These boys were bicycle mechanics. They didn't know a thing about building engines. They wrote to several automobile companies, but none would help. Finally, they turned to Charlie Taylor, a mechanic in their bicycle shop. Charlie designed and built the first airplane engine in history. It was also the first and last engine that Charlie Taylor ever designed. He hand-tooled the crankshaft on a bicycle lathe. It had no cooling system. There was no carburetor. The raw gas was just dumped into the cylinders. It was louder than a hurricane, and it spit gasoline all over the wings of the pilot. It had barely enough horsepower to drag that flyer up into the thick ocean air. In the immortal words of Charlie Taylor himself, it weren't much of an engine. In fact, just between you and me, it was mighty close to being a good-sized bomb.
We reached camp Friday noon, having come over from Mandio in a small gasoline launch with all the equipment needed to build our new machine in tow.
When we arrived, the conditions for gliding were so fine that we took the old machine out of the hangar we built last year and spent the finest day we ever had in practice.
That was September 1903. But after those first blissful days, bad luck set in. We had ourselves a series of violent storms with 75-mile-an-hour winds. Made it hard enough to keep a roof over your head and your toes on the ground, much less fly an airplane. Then, as soon as the weather improved, the propellers broke clean off their shafts. New ones had to be ordered from the shop in Ohio. After a couple of weeks, when the new propellers arrived, the stormy weather returned. When the skies cleared, the frame supporting the tail got cracked. Then, more storms. For 3 months they waited out on those dunes for the weather and machinery to cooperate. Finally, on a clear, windy December morning, me and my buddies at the live station got the signal that they were ready to test the new flyer. We rushed over to help them drag all 750 pounds of it up the hill, a quarter-mile away. They flipped a coin, and Org was chosen to pilot the first flight. Before he did, he set up his camera on a tripod. He handed me the shutter and told me to pull it just as soon as the plane took off. At 10:35 a.m., he climbed on board. They rolled the plane down the track. The engine was making such an infernal racket, some of the boys that were hanging around to see what was going on hightailed it from home for fear of getting blown to pieces. I stood still as a sand crab, watching closely, holding the shutter, waiting for the right moment. Then it came. Wilbur let go of the wing, and the machine and Orville lifted up off the ground. I was so stunned, I fell over backwards, let go of the shutter, and just stared at it with my mouth wide open, like I'd just seen a ghost. I'd never taken a photograph before, so I wasn't even sure if I'd taken one this time. But when they developed the plate later on, there it was, a miracle. The first airplane lifting off the ground. That's Wilbur. They're off to the right. Just let go of the wing. And over, can you see him there in the middle of the plane? That's exactly what I saw. And as God as my witness, that plane flew over 100 feet, and it was the grandest sight of my life. When he landed, we all ran over and jumped up and down congratulating him. Then it was Wilbur's turn. He flew the plane even farther. Then Orville took another try. Then Wilbur again. Each time staying up longer, flying farther. Then the fourth flight, with Wilbur, lasted so long, he was just a distant speck when he finally came down.
Father, success! 4 flights Thursday morning, all against 21-mile wind. Started from level with engine power alone. Average speed through air, 31 miles. Informed press, home for Christmas.
4 flights. After the 4th flight, we were in complete jubilation. Shaking our heads, shaking hands, laughing, dreaming of the possibilities for the future.
This is an invention which will make further wars practically impossible.
We were so excited, we didn't notice that the wind had picked up a bit. Suddenly, a great gust had caught the machine and started to turn it over. Orville and I grabbed it, tried to hold it down, but it spun on us. He was smart enough to let go, but I was darned if I was going to let all that work get away. So I hung on for dear life. The machine flipped over, rolled down the hill, cracked and splintering with me tangled up in the propeller and the chains. 750 pounds of machinery falling into pieces all around me, knocking me about, rolling me over and over like a rat in a barrel full of tin cans. Finally, when we came to rest in a heap of wood, metal, fabric, and human being, I, of course, being a human being, or what was left of me, I was so dizzy, I think I was talking gibberish for a few minutes. It was a miracle that I escaped with just a few bumps and bruises. But I knew I had something very precious to go with my pain. I had a great tale to tell my grandchildren. I would gather them around years later and say, boys and girls, did you know that your grandpop made the 5th flight in the Wright brothers flying machine?
Father.
Father, success.
Success. Informed press.
Informed press. Home for Christmas.
The press was informed, but like I said before, none of us really had believed it was possible. A few scattered newspapers carried the story, but most just ignored it, assuming it was just more crazy claims from folks with a few marbles missing. The brothers returned home for Christmas, and we went on with our lives trying to convince anyone who would listen to what they had done. Wilbur and Orville wrote repeatedly to the folks in Washington hoping to interest the government in their invention, but they got no response. It was 5 years before anyone took notice. 5 years before they received any offer of any kind. Then, the French government started showing interest. Well, that made the folks in Washington prick up their ears a bit. Soon, the whole world would know just what a grand thing that Orville and Wilbur Wright had done. Now, you might think that the inventors of the airplane would have made a heap of money and spent the rest of their days taking it easy. But somehow, life is not so simple.
For a while now, most of my time has been taken up with lawsuits. I'm hoping to be freed from this kind of work before another year has ended. It is much more pleasant to go to Kitty Hawk for experiments than to worry over lawsuits. We'd hoped to sell our invention to governments for enough money to satisfy our needs and then devote our time to science. But the jealousy of certain persons blocked this plan and compelled us to rely on our patents and commercial exploitation. We wish to be free from business cares so that we can give all our time to the science and art of aviation. But we have been compelled to spend our time on business matters instead during the past few years. When we think what we might have accomplished if we'd been able to devote this time to experiments, we feel very sad. But it is always easier to deal with things than with men, and no one can direct his life entirely as he would choose.
A few months after writing those words, Wilbur Wright died of typhoid fever, never having had the pleasure of returning to Kitty Hawk for more soaring flights across those dunes. Orville lived another 36 years, although he stopped flying long before.
Actually, I got more thrill out of flying before I had ever been in the air at all, while lying in bed thinking how exciting it would be to fly.
But, ladies and gentlemen, it was my privilege to witness the first successful flight of an airplane. It was the grandest sight of my life. When Columbus discovered America, he could not have known what the outcome would be. And no one at that time could have caught a glimpse of what really did come from his discovery. Likewise, these two brothers could not have had even a faint glimpse of what their discovery was going to bring to later generations. No one there could have given a guess along this line. Anyone more than anyone living could have figured the final outcome of Columbus's experiment when he pushed off through those trackless waters. They thought they had invented an end to all wars, but their true legacy is something less and something more. As for me, I've seen more amazing things in my lifetime than I could have ever dreamed. 66 years after the first flight, I sat in the living room with my grandchildren, watching as Neil Armstrong landed Apollo 11 on the moon. You know what Mr. Armstrong had with him as he took that first giant step? Some of the original fabric from the plane that I helped launch on that cold, bitter December day on Kill Devil Hill.